Hi, it's Elliot, and I don't want to be making this video. I'm a little sick. I'm all sick and tired, and I'm just gonna meditate. That's what I was going to do. It's like I make all these videos in my bed because right before I make them, I'd rather not be. But then I keep thinking and knowing like I want to do this thing, and I could totally just focus, center, and let the thing kind of like relax at the outskirts of me. But I've been meaning to make this video for maybe a couple of few days, or at least just to say it so that I've said it. And that way it's in the ether just a little more loudly, but also formed in my own mind and sense of being a little bit more sequentially, so I can say fuck it and move on to the next thing, or at least the next thing of this thought. Because it's hard and ineffective to keep all of the parts of something that you're building in your mind like to a certain point. It just gets ridiculous, all the parts that you're keeping together. So if you just put it into something, write it down, make a video, talk out loud to nothing, it gives your progress a kind of substantiality that the universe helps you maintain, and it kind of takes over a little bit, so you can rely on what you've done and build upon it instead of trying to keep all of it together in your mind, which is the story of my fucking life. But anyways, I digress. uh, why I want to make this video and why it's important, uh, if even just one person hears this, is the key to manipulation is stupidity. And being smart is just really being open-minded and listening and being willing. And the world is so much more changed than already than is being perceived, which just means that there's going to be some that are totally prepared, or in hindsight or foresight or present sight, that's what it'll seem to be, because people are like, wow, you're really prepared. It's like, no, I was just like rolling with like the now that I was paying attention to. Preparing for a future that hasn't been created is dangerous, because if you're preparing for it, it could be something you're fearing, and then you kind of create it. And then if it's something lovely and you're preparing for it, then it's something lovely that you don't want to fuck up or get wrong. And that cylinder of expectation is detrimental to its most beautiful expression. It's that preparedness. I'm sure there's some like geometric shape, that preparedness or prepare really means like punch yourself in the face or wanting to. Anyways, the point, which there are many, but most beautiful shapes have many points. See, I'm a little like sick, so I'm a little bit more like nonsensical, hyper existential. Goofy, ridiculous. Oh. All right. All right. I don't think this is gonna be a long video. So the world's going through a lot of changes, and people are really focused on the economy because the economy, which isn't even what the word means or what it used to mean, the economy is not a thing. It's again another description. It's like, look at the economy of this. This is economical. This economy is what a thing does. It's not what a thing is. It's crashing, it's smashing, it's doing its thing that it normally does. It is the economy, the people that run the economy don't give a fuck if it's crashing or peaking or anything like that. Their wealth doesn't depend on it. Their wealth depends on your and our belief in it. It's like the faith in the economy is really the thing they need. That's the value in it. Because, and I guess this is my point, like stocks are going up or down or crashing or whatever the fuck. And people's investments are all wonky, and housing markets and commodities and all that shit. So when it's like, this is why I need to say it, because it's the stupidest fucking thing. If like, just think clearly. If you're not a machine and you're just projecting this program of enslavement being, if like tomorrow the stock market crashes or the value of our dollar crashes, and I'm Canadian, but they're all just doll hairs, and it goes to zero. It's like, oh no, I got nothing. Like nothing is worth nothing. I gotta have find something that retains its value. So I'm gonna invest in gold and silver because that stuff never loses value. What's the value that it's retaining as a piece of metal? And I'll go into that a little further if I can remember my point that I wanted to make off of that. I don't. If tomorrow our dollars are worth nothing, then this is the point. I remembered it. Our fiat currency has lost faith, because that's what fiat currency is. Um, it's I won't spare you looking up my nose. If you could fucking see out there with all my mustachios. People who don't think critically, or just think critically about other things, but stop thinking critically about stuff that worries them, like money. Fiat currency is basically um, has value in it that is based on belief. This is a piece of paper. It's just a piece of paper, but as a piece of paper, it has as much value as the piece of paper itself. And paper is pretty ubiquitous in our world. And actually, paper with shit on it already is less valuable uh, than paper that is blank, because then it could still be used to create something that might actually be more valuable than the paper it's written on. The only reason a dollar bill is with a dollar is because if I give you a dollar and you're like, okay, I'll take it, you're saying, hey man, I believe that this thing has represents um, value, and I'm receiving it as a representation of value. As opposed to uh, like a gold backed, gold standard dollar, which represents a piece of gold, and you know, gold has value. Gold is more valuable than a piece of paper. I would rather have a piece of gold than a piece of paper, and that's exactly the uh, myth. No, I don't want to use myth because myth is actually more true and symbolic than fiction. So yeah, that's the story. That's the fiction that um, we're told. To go back to the gold standard, or that was when money was worth something. You can't eat gold. You can't eat diamonds. You can't really wear either of them to keep you warm when it's cold. And say you just have a really like you have a thing for them, so you want it, and like there are value to these things, and they're actually the value in them is why they're so manipulated. But I digress. Like say you just I really like gold, and some people really like seeds, so they collect seeds, and this person's like, you collect seeds, I collect gold. uh, and so the value is based on scarcity. uh, if anybody's curious, and if you're curious watching this, uh, gold and silver are so plentiful on our planet. Now, this might be a bullshit statistic, which is my preface for every statistic. But I heard recently, and why I only believe it is because it was brought to my attention through the guide, like the guidance of my attention through my higher selves and being, is something like 20% of all the Earth's like mineable gold and or whatever is what has been mined and gold and stuff. Like that's what's been collected from Mother Father Earth. So It's not scarce. Uh, that's the only other kind of huge falsities with of beliefs when it comes to diamonds. Diamonds are among the most abundant forms of crystal on our planet. And it's so abundant that, unlike gold and other precious metals, where it can be a bit of a pain in the ass to collect yourself, to like do the work, although they use the same strategy, they basically, controllers are they, or those that we give authority, of all the diamonds that are mined and collected, most of it, like, I don't know a percentage, but whatever you think most is, and I don't mean 51%, like most, like some number between 90 and 100%, because it could be 99 point something. Most diamonds are actually mined, collected, and stored away and kept out of circulation so as to create the fiction of scarcity, because they're so abundant that they can't even just like slow down production or limit production to create the illusion of scarcity, which um, is most precious metals. But they do the same thing with gold and silver, and that's because, like, as materials in relationship with nature, uh, they are powerful. As materials in relationship to us, as materials in relationship with nature, in our true nature, they have value. If we were allowed to cultivate and create with precious metals and diamonds and precious stones to the same capacity that we're allowed to do whatever the fuck we want with plastics or wood, then our alchemical evolution would be uh, like nature propelled, like nature emerging. So you got to keep that shit away from us, basically. And if it is near us, you got to keep it so like you don't do what you could do with it. You hoard it, or you make little things, or you um, direct really negative energy towards these um, towards these precious waveform distributors, right? Like this diamond ring. It's a really pretty thing. See, I'm saying things, so frequency wise, anything to try and interrupt that. It's not conscious. It's a result. It's kind of automatic, like the choppas. Like the diamond ring or diamond earrings or something like that. The thoughts and things that we associate with it, whatever it is, ultimately and almost like with no exception, has a kind of energy of, I don't want to lose this. It's valuable. I don't want to get stolen. I could get mugged because I have it. I could get hurt because I have it. It carries this energy of scarcity. So, what is potentially super powerful for distribution, as like a material for the distribution of energy, becomes that, but what it distributes is limitation and fear. And this is part of what I wanted to mention in this video, or this telling. I'm going to take this opportunity to go on what a kind of tangent, but it's like, to get to the end, we have to go to a kind of beginning. And like I said, like I've mentioned in other videos, that are these live stream types. I'm just ranting off the top of my head. I'm not making any of it up. And when I'm being unclear or ambiguous, I almost always mention it. And what I'm not saying specifically, I know specifically. I just don't remember, because that's not as important. And if you want me to talk about anything more specifically, with kind of bringing facts to the forefront, or evidence, or anything like that, then mention in the comments. And I would gladly put together a presentation from which you can like do your own research, or just know things more solidly. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a conversation, and you don't bring fucking notes to a conversation unless you're weird and not used to talking to people that are pretty. Uncommon knowledge is the origins of money, which is really the origins of privacy, which is really the origins of slavery. And by slavery, I really mean the slavery of humanity. Because in times past, before the circulation of an investment in coinage, or as value representation, there was slavery. But what slavery was much kinder. It it wasn't, because there was no money. Nothing was commodified as such. So there was slavery, but it was less, and it wasn't a business. You didn't like try and get more slaves. And the slaves that existed, there was almost like a mutual understanding, and you still treated people like humans. You still treated people like people. It wasn't as atrocious. That only really came about in the few or many centuries uh, before like 0 AD. So up to like definitely between 3 and 600 BC, and possibly before then too. But it's like when like the Roman Empire and that kind of Hellenistic era is when slavery got really nasty because we turned people into coins, and coins don't have very many liberties. Or rather, we just strip them of that like we do people. So the origins of money, which is not commonly known, actually originated as the first like recorded uses of money, which I will use interchangeably and to mean coinage and credit. Basically, things that have vested value, value that we believe and represents other things as value. That's what I mean by money. The first recorded, and a lot has been destroyed, is about between 5,000 and 6,000 BC, closer to 6,000. And the reason that it can be a kind of beginning to the monetary system is because there are records or kind of proofs to life without it before that. So while we could maybe conclude that it existed before this, but we just don't have any evidence of it, we do have kind of evidence of society without it. And then it started. So that in a way, that is a kind of beginning. And it started in the time of Sumeria, which is a kind of false beginning itself in our own recorded history. And the way that it came about was it was introduced to Sumerian society in and around the area of Egypt and Assyria, and that kind of like Africa-ish, like that kind of realm, which we call the seeds of civilization, but it wasn't, and that's actually more commonly known by people that research than not. It was introduced by a people from the Indus Valley, and how we can know that is that these metals, gold and silver, were not, or rather were, foreign to Mesopotamia. But here it was introduced, and the short story is basically before then, resources were distributed by the king, the pharaoh, and they were divinely appointed. And it's been very useful to reclassify that kind of appointment as tyranny or as some kind of dictatorship and inhuman, when in actuality these responsibilities were given to people, and like even if, and it may have been hereditary, but that would make sense in a time where knowledge distribution and education may have been limited, and so you really trained from birth to have this kind of responsibility. And so these kings and queens of prehistory, along with like their hierarchy of support, things like people like priests and what I'll call secretaries, they felt the weight of responsibility. They felt responsible to the people and to God, to nature, to creation, to help manage the workings together of people for the most happiness and to create the most mutual opportunity. In a way, it kind of, I would think it kind of sucked, because it was less about having everything, because everything in, if in prehistory, and like these pharaohs, these kings, these queens, they're they're having everything was not a function of their keeping everything. It was a result, an effect of their receiving from the people. And gratitude. It was like distribute things fairly, evenly, and like, and in gratitude, they just like, but here, have this. You must be this. You must be that, and you're great. And this, like, and so they were elevated, but even that would have been tough in comparison to the responsibility. And so around 5,500 years ago, I'll just say 5,500 BC, 5,500 years BC, there came a people. And why I say people is because what's interesting about recorded history is that this people were not connected to a race of people. In some places it was recorded, it's like we don't know where they're from. In others, it was more of like an amalgamation of different races that didn't identify with one nation or another. And that's important because they didn't identify with any nation, they identified with their own group. Basically, they came in foreignly, and little by little, working first with the populace, and targeting first the, the, the populace that were the most self downtrodden, right? The people that don't have, but the only reason they don't have is because they don't create. And energetically, there was an opportunity for more people like this because the energy of our civilizations, of our spirits, was going through a cycle of poverty. So, taking advantage of that, they introduced these new opportunities to have things. So say the pharaohs and shit had gems and all this kind of stuff. Like they came in and was like, hey, we'll give you this for that. Like, you know, like you can have a sense of wealth that, you know, only the pharaohs and things like that have. And what they also did when it got a little scaled up was like they just like preyed on things like envy. You know, they go to one city and be like, and do kind of like the grunt work, this like the small scale stuff, and then they go to another city that was smaller. It was like, yo, don't you want to be great like them? Where ordinarily they're like, what are you talking about? I what? There was no comparison. There was no comparing. It was like, oh, they've got a big temple. You want to make a big temple? Like, don't you want this? Don't you want that? And then that kind of salesmanship changed their way of perceiving, and then indentured them to this economy that this group, this non-affiliated group, except with themselves, was creating this economy. And so all it takes is a little buying and selling to be like, okay, well, like, give me this, give me that. Like there was methods of transferring a representation of things before that, right? Be it chords and knots and scratches and sticks and things like that. And then it was like, okay, well, like instead of giving me that, or instead of giving you that, I'm going to give you these because these coins, these shekels, they can really represent more things. They're just easier, whatever. And I'm generalizing, but like I said, I'm ranting. I don't want to go into the details. It's less important. And what I hope I'm conveying, which is important, is the feeling, because that is understanding, and that's what I hope that you would get, because this is still the world that we're creating. So eventually, enough of these methods of like, oh, it just makes sense, you know, like why, you know, like money makes sense. Instead of carrying around oxes, you know, like you can have this, you can do that, and this can just represent oxes. When before that, people didn't want oxes, yo. They're like, everything is kind of economical. Things make sense. And there may have been some stagnancy, to be fair. That system of management could have reached was also reaching its a point of its own kind of needing to mature and evolve and become something greater. So like a lot of different forces came to a point to allow for this usurpation of sovereignty But eventually, there are not just enough people, populace, that had bought into currency that the divinely appointed stewards of humanity kind of were like, okay, all right, well, like we'll use it a little bit, and then a little bit turned into a lot, until eventually, almost in a peaceful way, this money became currency. And the main, and this may be a little bit of a tangent, but I'll risk it. The main generators of this kind of economy, which is also was very much based at the time on the materials that it was made out of. Like, where does gold come from? Where does silver go from? Where are the mines? Where are we getting people to do these things? But the main generators of this economy uh, was warfare, because, well, I already talked about it. Like, don't you want to have what this other person doesn't have? Like, well, don't you want to have too what this other person has? That's war. Even if it's your neighbor's garden, your neighbor's wife, whatever you want that someone else has, and you want to get it in a way that circumvents the way that they created it, is a kind of war. Because chances are it instills, or it infers some kind of taking advantage of someone else. So this haves and have nots, you then fuel them with envy, and you give them the tools of um, kind of getting what they want, the items of warfare, armor, weapons, and all of that. Well, like, there's only going to be so many places in the world at that time that they're really making that, and then they're making the best of it. And and it's not next door, or it's not in your city. So eventually, and not even after that long, like, we don't recognize just how long credit and the fractal monetary system has been actually in place. But before very long, it became impractical to carry all of these shekels from one place to another. So why not just write it down, and, like, with a seal or something, and it just represents that this amount this person has is giving to this other person. And then, should there be some kind of exchange, maybe the only thing we really need to exchange is the difference between the two, right? It just all starts to get really glossy, because the main power in having people believe in a money that has no value, that doesn't have any intrinsic, that's all fiat, it's all doesn't have any intrinsic, like, I can use this for something, is to start to have people believe that they're using something physical when really it's just imaginary. So you could say, hey, I've got this much and I'm going to give it to you this much. And it doesn't make sense to move it all around. So we'll just keep it in one place. We'll keep it in the bank and we'll create these notes of promissory and they can represent. And then whenever you ever really need it, like a transaction needs to be done or something like that, then you can go to the bank and that's where it is. So now you got all these people who think that they have value and it's all represented by these ledgers that are maintained by these bankers, which arose from the usurpation of the priest class. When really there's no exchange going on. It's just people being manipulated around the world, around across this board, and all the actual wealth being accrued and accumulated by the people that was like, hey, this has value. This is money. Except like if you can't let anybody know. Like it's a whole system based on secrecy. Which is why this group was not affiliated with any kind of nation, because the only affiliation that they could have was with each other, because it's not something one person could do on their own. It's something that needed like an infrastructure of people, but the loyalty had to be so supreme and so secretive. Because the real power wasn't the money, wasn't the stuff. It was in making choices and deciding. And then when you pit one nation against another, and then this nation has this stuff, don't you want to get this stuff? This will. It's just it's so easy to manipulate people. Once you commodify the things that are important, like food and defense and liberty, and then you take it away from them, right? Like say you're Egypt and you can't make Damascus steel. Well, fuck. Egypt doesn't toe the line, then we'll just get this tribe and this tribe and this tribe, and we'll give them a great deal on Damascus steel. And it's like, yo, bow and arrows aren't gonna beat lasers, no matter how many bows and arrows you got. So that was like the long and short of the beginnings of monetary propagation up until this very day. And this day, it's very much that way. It's not even really different. Because all money only has the belief, only has the value that we believe it has. And so if you're still with me, which I doubt, because even when I try not to, I don't make things easy to hear. I don't say things in a way that is easy to even understand because I've been teaching my whole life. And so, and teaching is communicating. And so, no matter how hard I try, I can't take the teaching or the efficacy of such out of my communication. And no one learns anything that they think they're learning easily. Nothing valuable is simple. And when it's simple, it's complex. Like the geometry of a snowflake is simple, but it's complex. And unless you're putting two and two together on your own and not mistakenly thinking that I'm doing it for you, you whatever you think you know doesn't matter, because when it comes down to it, how it affects you will be what you built in the first place. Right? I can tell you, I could open this video and let it been 3 minutes and just been like, yo, FYI, gold has no value. If like, well, it goes Pete Tong tomorrow and I got a bunch of shit that is like food and water and land, which is just my home. My home is maybe the home of my community and it's defensible. And you come to me with a bunch of fucking gold coins, which is actually the biggest joke, because people invest in gold right now don't get gold. They get numbers representing gold, which means that they're just taking the money that is becoming more and more scarce and less valuable and giving it away for more nothing except the illusion of security. But again, you come to my fucking fence, you come to my gate, and they're like, yo, you got a lot of nice stuff here. Look at all this gold. I'll give it to you if you give me like some eggs or some water. Or we just put a roof over my head for like 5 minutes. Like, okay, if I'm down and I want to help you, but you can keep your gold. You gotta like till this land, carry this shit, shovel that shit. You gotta do something. You gotta be valuable. Because that piece of metal is just a piece of metal. It doesn't do anything. People do. And the most valuable work is done by the most valued people. And the most valued people are happy, joyous, content, passion filled. So that maybe when shit hits the fan and they're not happy and they're not content, they're pissed off, and they've got life that they're willing to do anything to defend. And it's not their own. It's their own, but it's mostly those of others that they love. Those are valuable. That's valuable. That's priceless. That's the most valuable. That's actually what this whole system, monetary system of control is created to manipulate. The real value of people and our energy and what we create. So, in closing, I hope that you appreciate all the breadth of things that I've told you. Because I talked a lot more about just money and ignorance and brilliance and love. But in the near and present future, real value is how we treat each other. Real value is care. Resources. Some people like, you can't eat love either. Actually, you can. I know what you're thinking. I was thinking it too. High five. But if I'm hungry and I have food and I love you and you're hungry, chances are I'm going to give you, even if there's not a lot of food, I'm going to give you more than I'm going to take for myself. And we don't live in a world that is lacking for shit, for capability. It's just organized around a system that masks and disguises the fact that it's us that's creating all that value, and thusly, it's all that value belongs to us, and that there's more than enough for everybody, and that in actuality, everybody doesn't want everything. Everybody actually wants very few things, and the few things that everybody wants, there's more than enough room to create and provide for. So basically, the 3D moral of the story is don't fucking invest in gold or silver. That's not going to give you anything. When the monetary system shifts and changes and becomes more human, all that is further investing your consciousness in a system where things have more value than you do. You want me to build a house? I don't need money. I don't need money. You got all the materials too? You just need the labor? Guy, I'll help you build a house if I love you. And you love me. What's mine is yours, and yours is mine, and to the best of our ability, we're gonna cater to each other's personality. You want gold because you want to build something out of it? All right, cool. Let's get some gold. But a bunch of something sitting in a pile is not saved. That's dying. And truly, if you're looking for security, in the times to come, and you've been given this life path where you have a lot of monetary wealth in the system, and somehow you've managed to do that while protecting and cultivating love and your soul, then the best thing that you can do is use that in this time of transition to facilitate and aid people that love you. And I'm talking about the people that you don't really know yet. Because if you can overcome giving money to strangers that you believe are creating the world that you want to see, then you are also releasing the bonds and slavery of scarcity and feeling like you've been taken advantage of. I did this and this for that, for this money. Like, how can I just like give it to this person? I don't care what they say they're building this, they say they're doing that, but like, look, like they don't have anything. What if nothing comes from it? What if they're bamboozling me? What if tomorrow all your dollars are worth nothing? And value is replaced by a system created by participation and will, effort. Love, which is a force. In such a world, which is mathematically and psychologically and sociologically most probable, if you want to think quantitatively and qualitatively, in a world such as that, the person that didn't spend their soon to be meaningless wealth will find that they are poor in the most valuable resource, which is friendship and family. The clock is ticking. And that's exactly how New Earth and its infrastructure is being developed, because the land is there, the thinking is there, the consciousness is already here. But the structures it will be built around are going to be those with the mental, physical, emotional, and material resources in abundance, but not so distributed evenly, because that doesn't make sense. But come together in community, and thus balancing each other. That's the new world. They'll look back and be like these moguls of industry, and they'll be called moguls of industry because they weren't the most wealthy. They didn't have the most power or the most money in the old world, but that they brought enough to the burgeoning economy of livelihood. Right? In the future, they'll look back at the people that didn't invent shit, didn't teach shit, didn't motivate or defeat or dissolve, or like of all the different facets of evolution revolving, to look back at these people, that what they did was transliterate, and I'm using that word in a funny way, their pre-wealth to fund humanity. They will be looked upon as the moguls of industry of the pre-world and the present. And maybe looked upon with all of the others, leaders, as having the most bravery. Finally got that out of me a little bit. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening. Thanks for thinking. Thanks for making this yours. Thanks for leading. I love you a lot for being yourself. And it is my honor to be connected to you. It's true. Join me another time. I'll be around. Namaste. So much love. For who? You. Who, me? Yeah, you. I love you.